While NIST has been unable to come up with a valid explanation for a collapse due to fire, there are at least 3 good reasons why such a collapse could not have happened in any case. One is the widespread pre-knowledge of the event. As we have said before, the collapse of a steel structure due to fire is considered an absolute impossibility in the architectural world.
Steel structural frame buildings, high-rise buildings, simply do not collapse due to fire.
We've never had a steel-framed skyscraper collapse in the United States or internationally.
No high-rise steel structure has ever been destroyed by a fire in the history of construction.
Consequently, if Building 7 was truly brought down by fire, it would have been a totally unexpected event, which would have taken everyone by surprise. It turns out instead that dozens of policemen, firemen, and first responders had been warned that the building was going to come down as early as 5 hours before it happened.
All I can attest to is that by noon or 1 o'clock, they told us we had to move from that triage site up to Pace University, a little further away, because Building 7 was going to come down or being brought down.
Did they actually use the word brought down, and who was telling you this?
The fire department, and they did use the word, we're going to have to bring it down.
Firemen also had been warned of the impending collapse. Fireman Hollowak, we were just hanging out until Tower 7 came down. Fireman Sweeney, we stood and waited for World Trade Center 7 to come down. By 4 p.m., CNN had already picked up the rumor and was spreading it around the world.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7, in the World Trade Center complex is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing.
At 5 o'clock, the BBC announced that the building had already collapsed, even though it was still standing in the background.
Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
As you can see behind me...
At 5 o'clock, Building 7 can clearly be seen on the right of the picture. But the BBC correspondent, who was obviously unfamiliar with the landscape, didn't recognize it. This has fueled ludicrous conspiracy theories, which accuse the mainstream media of having been informed in advance of what was going to happen on September 11. In truth, this incident only confirms that the information on the impending collapse had been circulating long enough in downtown Manhattan to have already reached the BBC even before it happened. At about the same time, when CNN recorded the explosions near Building 7, they also captured the police clearing the area and announcing the collapse.
Keep your eye on that building, it'll be coming down.
Building is about to blow up. Moving back.
Back here. All right, guys? Sorry.
We are looking back. There's a building about to blow up.
This is the account by a paramedic who witnessed the collapse.
You know, we heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. Turned around, we were shocked to see that the building was, it looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out, and it was horrifying. And then, about a second later, the bottom floor caves out, and the building followed after that, and we saw the building crash down all the way to the ground.
There's even someone who heard a countdown moments before the building collapsed. First responder Kevin McPadden was stationed near Building 7, awaiting for orders from a Red Cross representative.
He kept asking the Red Cross rep, what's going on, what's going on? And all the time he had his hand over the radio while he was getting a countdown. And then he's just like, at the last 3 seconds, he takes his hand off and you hear 3, 2, 1, and he had this heartbroken face. He's just like, just run for your life. It was about a second or two after the countdown ended that you started hearing the explosions. Now, we're talking about bombs. Because, you get that bam! There's like a little explosion and then the force. And then boom, 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 boom. That was the building coming down.
Question. Given that the collapse of a steel skyscraper due to fire would have been an unprecedented event, how could so many people have known about it so many hours in advance? If the police clearing the area expected a structural failure due to fire, why would they use such an expression as, the building is about to blow up? Can you explain how an unprecedented, totally unexpected collapse due to fire could be predicted with absolute precision by an actual countdown? The second reason that makes the official explanation by NIST untenable is the symmetry of the collapse. As we have seen before, the entire top section of the building falls as a single piece, maintaining an almost perfect symmetry as it descends towards the ground.
The symmetry is the smoking gun. It cannot happen that when you have asymmetric damage, you will get a perfectly symmetrical collapse. And all you need to do is look at the videos and see that.
The exterior columns on the outside, as well as on the inside, at the bottom would have to be severed almost at the same time.
In order for the perimeter to fall perfectly and symmetrically, which it pretty much does at Building 7, all of those columns have to be removed within a tenth of a second of each other.
Question: can you explain how the almost simultaneous removal of all the columns, which was necessary for Building 7 to collapse in the way it did, can be caused by fire alone? The last and possibly most conclusive piece of evidence against the official explanation is freefall. After the initial failure of the penthouse on the eastern side of the building, the entire structure came crashing down to the ground in a little more than 6 seconds. David Chandler of Architects and Engineers has measured the downwards acceleration of the building from the start of the global collapse.
We can measure the acceleration of Building 7 by video analysis. The slope of the velocity graph gives the acceleration. Note that global collapse starts suddenly, and for the next 2.5 seconds the building accelerates at the rate of 9.88 meters per second squared. In other words, the rate of collapse of World Trade Center Building 7 over the first 2.5 seconds is literally indistinguishable from free fall in a vacuum.
When Architects and Engineers presented NIST with these calculations, they forced them to correct their preliminary report and acknowledge the free fall of the building for the first 8 stories of the collapse. From NIST's final report we read, a more detailed analysis of the descent of the north face found 3 stages. The first was a slow descent with acceleration less than that of gravity that corresponded to the buckling of the exterior columns at the lower floors. The second stage was a free fall descent over approximately 8 stories at gravitational acceleration for approximately 2.25 seconds. 2.25 seconds is more than 1/3 of the global collapse. Once NIST had admitted the free fall for 1/3 of the collapse, the outcome of the debate was sealed.
Building 7, NIST reports admits fell at the rate of gravity for the first 100 feet. Well, that's impossible unless there's nothing resisting it.
NIST has always acknowledged this.
Free fall time would be an object that has no structural components below it.
And, as we have seen before, the almost simultaneous removal of the supporting structure can only be obtained with a controlled demolition.
The building didn't disappear so the building can fall for 100 feet at free fall speed. That's impossible. That evidence alone would indicate that the official story doesn't hold water.
Question: can you explain how free fall, which requires the almost simultaneous removal of the supporting structure, can be achieved without a controlled demolition? This very question was posed to Senator John McCain by a 9/11 researcher in April 2013 during a C-SPAN broadcast.
Senator McCain, the National Institute of Standards and Technology asserts that the collapse of Building 7 was caused by fire, yet they acknowledge that the first 100 feet of that collapse took place at free fall acceleration. Now, engineers will tell you that fire cannot do this, and that the only method by which it can be accomplished is the use of pre-planted explosives.
Your question is what?
Well, how do you explain this discrepancy of 100 feet of free fall without the use of explosives?
To tell you the truth, this is an area that I am not very familiar, and if you would drop me a note and mention that we talked on C-SPAN, I'd be glad to get you a more complete answer, but
It is unfortunate that Senator McCain could not answer, as he is the person who wrote the foreword to the popular mechanics book, Debunking 9/11 Myths. In the foreword, McCain stated, "Any explanation for 9/11 must start and end with the facts. The evidence must be gathered and analyzed. Then, only then, can conclusions be drawn." But now that the evidence has been gathered and conclusions can be drawn, he claims ignorance on the whole matter. This brings us to the last question, which is not only for the debunkers, but for anyone who cares about freedom, democracy, and an honest government. If you were aware of solid evidence disproving the official version and suggesting the involvement of some rogue elements of the government in the terrorist attacks, Would it be more unpatriotic and anti-American to ask for a new investigation, or to turn a blind eye to it and pretend such evidence doesn't exist? Given that the people's trust in institutions is of paramount importance for a nation's well-being, would that trust be better served by denying the evidence of a conspiracy, or by bringing those suspected to accountability in a court of law?